Chapter 3. An Audience with Lestrange. Getting a message to a man like Corvus Lestrange was not a simple matter of sending an owl. It was a delicate, dangerous dance through a web of intermediaries, each one more paranoid and menacing than the last. Leo Gable, drawing on every shady connection he had ever made, spent 2 days navigating this treacherous network. He started with a goblin who dealt in cursed artifacts, who pointed him to a disgruntled house elf running an illegal betting ring, who finally gave him the location of a seemingly abandoned warehouse in the industrial outskirts of wizarding London. This was where the meeting would take place. He said to come alone, Leo told Alistair, his voice tight with anxiety as they sat in the cramped front seats of the camper van, parked a safe distance away. Just me. And to bring a sample. Alistair looked from the grimy, foreboding warehouse to Leo's pale face. The professor in him, the part that had spent a lifetime in ordered, predictable environments, screamed that this was madness. But the dying man, the cornered animal fighting for his family's survival, knew there was no other way. He could not send this boy in alone. Leo had the street smarts, but he lacked the cold, intellectual fortitude needed to face a predator like Lestrange. No, Alistair said, his voice firm. We are partners, Mr. Gable. We will go in together. But he said, Corvus Lestrange deals in intimidation, Alistair interrupted, his gaze sharp and analytical. His instructions are a test, a way to establish dominance before the negotiation even begins. To acquiesce is to show weakness. We will arrive together as equals presenting a product. It is the only way to command respect. He handed Leo a single glowing blue vial. Then from an inner pocket of his own robes he produced a second one for himself. It felt cold and heavy in his hand. A small beacon of hope and a terrible burden all at once. He tucked his wand into his sleeve, the familiar smooth wood a small comfort against his trembling wrist. Let him see the product, Alistair instructed, his voice low and steady. Answer his questions simply. Do not volunteer information, and let me do the negotiating. Am I understood? Leo, looking as if he were about to walk into a dragon's den, which in many ways he was, gave a jerky nod. Together, they stepped out of the relative safety of the camper van and began the long walk toward the warehouse, their footsteps echoing in the unnerving silence of the deserted street. The interior of the warehouse was vast and cavernous, smelling of rust, damp, and dark magic. The only light came from a single bare bulb hanging from the high ceiling, which cast long, distorted shadows that danced like specters. In the center of the space, sitting on a crate like a king on a makeshift throne, was Corvus Lestrange. He was a man whose madness was etched onto his very being. His eyes, wide and manic, darted around constantly. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his chin, and his teeth were stained from years of potion abuse. He was flanked by 2 hulking cronies who looked as though they had been carved from granite. Corvus's eyes narrowed as Alistair and Leo approached. A slow, unsettling smile spread across his face. Well, look what we have here. I said to come alone, Sparky. Did I stutter? His voice was a high-pitched, unpredictable thing. One moment a whisper, the next a screech. Leo flinched, but Alistair stepped forward, his academic robes looking absurdly out of place in this grimy underworld setting. My associate and I are partners, Alistair said, his voice calm and even, a stark contrast to Corvus's manic energy. The product is a joint venture. It was appropriate we both be present. Corvus stared at Alistair for a long, tense moment, his head cocked to the side. Then he let out a sudden barking laugh. A professor, Sparky, you brought your old professor? What's the matter? Needed help with your homework? We have a sample, Leo said quickly, eager to get to the point. He held up his vial. The blue liquid glowed in the dim light, immediately capturing Corvus's attention. Corvus's manic grin faded, replaced by a look of intense curiosity. He beckoned with a long, dirty finger. Bring it here. Leo walked forward and handed the vial to one of the cronies, who then passed it to Corvus. Lestrange held the vial up to the light, his eyes wide with a mixture of suspicion and fascination. It's blue. Felix Felicis is gold. I'm not a fool. Traditional Felix Felicis is impure, Alistair explained, his tone that of a teacher patiently correcting a student. The golden hue is a result of impurities in the brewing process and the stabilizing agents. What you are holding is the active compound in its purest form. It is faster acting, more potent, and has none of the emotional rebound associated with the inferior product. Corvus stared at him, then back at the vial. He seemed to be considering Alistair's words. Then, without warning, his mood shifted violently. He hurled the vial against the far wall, where it shattered with a small tinkling crash. "I don't deal in talk," he shrieked, jumping to his feet. "I deal in results. How do I know this isn't just colored water? How do I know you're not ministry orders trying to trap me?" Leo froze, his face a mask of terror. The two cronies took a menacing step forward. This was it. This was where they died. But Alistair did not flinch. While Leo saw only the manic screaming rage, Alistair saw the underlying insecurity. He saw a man who had built his reputation on fear and superstition, a man who was terrified of being made a fool. The academic in Alistair, the man who had spent his life dealing with facts and observable phenomena, took over. "You are correct to be skeptical," Alistair said, his voice cutting through Corvus's tirade with the precision of a scalpel. "A healthy dose of paranoia is a valuable asset in your line of work. However, your methodology for testing the product is wasteful." Corvus stopped his shrieking, momentarily thrown off by Alistair's calm, analytical tone. "What did you say?" Alistair held up the second vial, the one he had brought himself. "This represents a significant investment of time, resources, and rare ingredients. Smashing it against a wall tells you nothing. You want a demonstration? Very well." Before anyone could react, Alistair uncorked the vial and downed the entire contents in a single gulp. The effect was instantaneous. A brilliant golden warmth spread through his chest, chasing away the cold dread that had taken root there. The exhaustion that had plagued him for months vanished. The persistent ache in his joints disappeared. The world, which had seemed gray and faded, suddenly snapped into sharp, vibrant focus. For the first time in a very long time, Alistair Finch felt truly, gloriously alive. Leo stared at him, horrified. "Professor, what are you doing?" Corvus and his cronies looked on, stunned into silence. They had expected fear, pleading, perhaps a desperate duel. They had not expected this. Alistair turned to Corvus, a small, confident smile playing on his lips. "The recommended dosage is a single drop. I find that a liberal application helps to make a point more effectively. Now, as I was saying, the product is flawless. The question is not whether it works. The question is, are you the right person to distribute it?" As if on cue, a loud crack echoed from the rafters above. One of the heavy, rusted chains holding a stack of crates had chosen that exact moment to snap. The entire stack, weighing several tons, began to topple directly towards Corvus Lestrange. Corvus and his men, who had been focused on Alistair, were caught completely off guard. They looked up, their faces masks of pure terror. But Alistair, his senses preternaturally sharp, had already seen it coming. With a speed and agility he had not possessed in 30 years, he drew his wand. "Asterisk, arresto momentum," he shouted. His voice, amplified by the potion's magic, boomed through the warehouse. The massive stack of crates froze in midair, hovering mere inches above Corvus's head. Dust and splinters rained down around him. For a full 10 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then, with a flick of Alistair's wand, the crates crashed harmlessly to the floor in the empty space beside them. Corvus slowly rose to his feet, dusting himself off. He looked at the wreckage, then at Alistair, and finally at the empty vial in Alistair's hand. The manic rage in his eyes was gone, replaced by something new, a deep, profound respect, mingled with a healthy dose of fear. He began to laugh. It was not the high-pitched shriek from before, but a low, throaty chuckle. "A professor," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You've got a bigger set of Niffler's nuts than anyone I've ever met." He strode forward and clapped Alistair on the shoulder. "You've got a deal. You bring me this blue magic, and I'll make sure the whole world knows your name." Alistair, the golden warmth of the potion still coursing through his veins, simply nodded. He knew he had not just sold a product. He had sold a piece of his soul. But as he and a visibly shaken Leo walked out of that warehouse and back into the night, a contract secured, Alistair felt a dangerous, unfamiliar thrill. He had faced down one of the most feared dark wizards in the country, and had not only survived, but had emerged victorious. It was a powerful, intoxicating feeling, and as the last of the Felix Felicis began to fade, leaving the familiar ache and weariness in its place, Alistair knew, with a chilling certainty, that he would do anything to feel it again.